welcome everyone. I'm Jack Llewellyn, and this is Cartels, Conspiracies, and Camarena. Yesterday, Rolling Stone magazine on its website put out a report. The report talks about a request that former president, current presidential candidate Trump had made to some of his aides a while ago. And that was he asked them to put together, to prepare a plan for the use of American military assets against Mexican cartels in the event he is elected back as president. That's a pretty, significant statement from a major candidate like this. And so I wanted to talk about it and think about it some. There are a couple of things in the report that I think are really important. One of the first things the report says is, hey, we really want to get the cooperation of the Mexican government. But it goes on to say, and I'm going to read this directly because I want to make sure I get it right. It says, it is vital that Mexico not be led to believe that they have veto power to prevent the United States from taking the actions necessary to secure its borders and people. Then the report goes to a new chapter, which is titled Tier 4 Victory Phase. So they're pretty presumptuous and optimistic. But here, listen to this. This is important. The goal is to crush cartel networks with full military force in as rapid a fashion as possible. This means expanding the role beyond special forces, targeted strikes, and intelligence operations to include elements of the Marines, Army, Navy, Air Force, and Coast Guard. Again, that's a direct quote, and that sounds a whole lot like an invasion of Mexico. Now, of course, candidate Trump is not the first person to talk about using the U.S. military against the Mexican cartels. We hear it occasionally from people in Congress, mostly on the Republican side of the aisle. And one in particular who's talked about it at some length is Representative Dan Crenshaw, who represents the 2nd Congressional District in Texas. And if you remember, he's the one who called out El Mencho and El Mayo by name. All this comes a week or two after the DEA acknowledged what we all already knew to be the case. CJNG and CDS are the largest, most influential, and most problematic cartels in Mexico, and they are responsible for a large portion of the drugs that are trafficked from Mexico into the United States. So yesterday, I read through the report on the plan put together for candidate Trump. I thought about some of the statements from Representative Crenshaw and others, and it came up with some questions. And I have some questions for them, not on the operational specifics, but on the thought processes. So I'm going to give you my list of questions for them. And maybe it informs the discussion at some point. But here are some of the questions I would ask anyone thinking about the use of military force against Mexican cartels, particularly if it involves any incursion into Mexico. So here they are. Have you thought about the internal structure of the cartels, in particular CJNG and CDS, that have led to those cartels having unique longevity and influence? Have you considered the succession planning of those cartels or the succession apparatus and mechanisms of those cartels in the event something should happen to either El Mencho or El Mayo, neither of whom is young or in good health, by the way? Have you thought about the relationship of the cartels, CJNG, CDS, and many others, that those cartels have with the communities in which they are prominent, and how those communities would react if there was an aggression into Mexico by the U.S. military. Have you considered what other cartels would do in the event of a void arising from the arrest or death of El Mencho and or El Mayo? Have you thought about what other entities outside of Mexico might do to fill that void? Have you thought about what entities in the United States might do? Would the arrest or death of El Mencho or El Mayo, or even a complete destruction and dismantling of their cartels, impact the demand for narcotics and illegal drugs in the United States? Do you have a plan for addressing the clandestine labs in the United States manufacturing the same drugs being produced in Mexico and shipped into the United States, all of which are documented by the DEA on their website? Are you prepared for the deaths of American soldiers if they go into battle against heavily armed and, in many cases, well-trained cartel militias? Is the American public? And last but not least, have you considered the potential for deadly retaliation at home and abroad? Now, those are just a few of the questions that came to mind yesterday as I was thinking about the plan being presented to candidate Trump. There are more. There are a lot more. My point here is that the cartels in Mexico, their relationship with the Mexican government, with the Mexican people, and their activities that affect the United States are complex problems that require well-rounded solutions, well-considered solutions. And I fear, as maybe some of you do as well, that those people in charge now, or those people thinking about the use of military force or the use of military assets against the cartels, don't have this broad range of thought and don't understand the answers to some of these questions that I posed. Again, just something to consider and think about, especially as elections come up in the next couple of years. That's all for today on Cartels, Conspiracies, and Camarena. Have a good day.